or change of benefits.
Yeah.
Normally the use of emergency language when it comes to finance is so that once a financial decision has taken place, if there's bills or type of payments involved, that language is used. But you are correct. We had this been brought to council sooner, we could have foregone the emergency language because we could have had time to allow the 30 days to pass before the end of the year.
Yeah.
I can't speak to why it appeared when it did because I'm not the committee chair. Kathy Payne might be able to answer that question. But I hope that kind of helps on kind of the why it is written as it is now.
Yeah.
And I will say, I do agree with you on council insurance. One of the plans that we kicked around before we decided on this particular avenue was to do away with insurance for council altogether.
Yeah.
And
I think you'd have a lot of support for that. And that's not to say anything about the job that you guys do. You run, you get elected. You should be compensated for that.
Yeah.
But it's not a full-time job. And it's just something I've always wondered about. So, it's not on the merit of the idea.
Yeah.
It's on the process of calling it an emergency to affect this change in a fast, hurry-up kind of manner.
Yes.
Okay, well, once
I
again,
understand
it's not an emergency.
Correct.
And so when you keep saying that word, it's not an emergency. And the one thing
But that's
I
the
would
point.
like,
Seal, that's my point. It's not an emergency.
but
You're
that's
calling
the
it an
language you
emergency.
have to use. That's the legal jargon. It's not,
So
that
what's
isn't something we came up
What's the
with.
legal standard then for
But
declaring
I would like
emergency?
to, I think we've all said that several times.
Yeah.
What I would like to explain about our process is that you say, why didn't it come up? It just came up about this last week. No, it did not just come up about this last week. For every piece of legislation, the average piece of legislation takes a minimum, and Bruce would know better than anybody, I'd say 12 weeks, the average piece.
Yeah.
Some take 6 months,
Yeah.
some take a year. The average piece of legislation takes 12 weeks to pass.
We knew on January 1st.
And we have committee meetings
Yeah.
prior to these. These are kind of, I always think of this is our official evening where we put our stamp on it. Our work is done in our committee meetings. So we can have several committee meetings, which are reported every evening, every Monday night at our regular meetings. Some people ask that Bruce has them. He sends them out copies of notices or announcements, which I'm sure you can ask the next council president to put you on notice. So then you would know when all these committees, but we do announce them publicly every Monday night when our committee meetings are and they are open to the public.
So to your point, we knew January 1st, 2021, that there was going to be a December 31st, 2021. There's no reason to do this on an
that's not
emergency
correct
basis.
because
Yes, it is. Of course it is. You knew that at the beginning of the year there would be an end of the year, and my point is that
so
if
the
this is a
idea was that
priority-
we didn't know at the beginning of the year that we were going to have a meeting, and when one of our meetings, one of the topics came up about compensation because we were doing other things. The last thing we're thinking about is our compensation. And in one of our meetings, which everybody in this room that was at that meeting can attest, this was brought up. And we said, maybe this is something we need to look at. We've all had feelings about it. I'm leaving council. This does nothing for me.
Yeah.
And we've had people that served on council for 30 years. And when they retired, they got Zippo, 30 years.
If that's a problem that needs to be-
part-time, I never call this job part-time. I have 5 regular meetings other than every committee meeting and these meetings I have to attend to be on council and several other things. And I would think a lot of people in here would tell you, not part-time. It can be what you make it. It can make what you don't make it. I don't really have a problem with insurance at all.
Yeah.
I think people need it. I think if you, we have part-time employees in the city that get insurance. I think that taking it down to single coverage is fair, especially since we are increasing the rate of pay. But the reason we're increasing the rate of the pay that amount, number one, that's the amount that has to get him into public employees retirement.
Yeah.
Number two, we did surveys, and all of this has been explained in our other meetings. We did surveys. We surveyed what our council makes compared to cities our size with budgets our size. We are very low. We have had, I don't even remember, maybe we've had one raise since I've been here. Not sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't significant, I'll tell you that.
I understand.
And number two, and the same goes for the mayor's position.
Yeah.
We compared what other mayors are making compared to our mayor, and I think Luke is the least part-time mayor
Luke's totally
we have had
full-time.
in years.
Yeah.
So, and it shows in our city, it shows in our progress. So these are just, this is not to disagree. This is just to tell you, this is how we got to where we are at. And so maybe a little poor planning, but we were dealing with a pandemic. We were dealing with all kinds of other issues that put this city on hold, and we didn't know where we were going to be at financially. But they can't do this next year. They can't vote, and if nobody changes office, so as a council person, as a person that has served in this position, I think it's respectful, and I think it's the right thing to do going forward for the other council people.
I don't think people agree with that. I've talked to a lot of people in this
That's
town.
okay.
Yeah.
That's
People can
okay.
disagree. I've talked to a lot of people in this town about this.
So have I.
And I don't think people in this town agree that council compensation is an emergency. I just don't.
It's not an emergency. This
There
is
you go. You
This is
said it
not an
again.
emergency.
Steele, you said it again.
It's a jargon. It's a word. We have had several meetings, and you know what? We've had how many phone calls have we had to our city? I've had no phone calls in regards to any of these items. I don't know. Have we had any at the mayor's office? So I don't know. This is people. We have our names on the website.
Yep.
We have our phone numbers on the website. We all have emails. I don't know of anybody that's ever called the mayor unless they call him constantly that doesn't get an answer. And our department heads are always accessible.
It's your prerogative to do it. No question about that.
Correct.
I'm here to raise the issue of that this is not an emergency. You've said it three times now. You guys are calling it one. Thank you. You guys are calling it one to affect the swift passage, but that's not the kind of thing that builds confidence in people's perceptions of government, people's perceptions of politicians. I think it's bad form, and I think a lot of people feel that way about it, and I think it's something for you guys to consider. You're going to do what you're going to do, well within your rights to do it, because you guys are the ones that got elected to council, but there's a new one coming in, and there are reasons that there's a new one coming in, and I just think that's worth bringing up. Last point, I will make it very quick. This is related to point number 5. I saw the other day that fentanyl overdoses are now the #1 cause of death for Americans between age 18 and 45. That is a true emergency. And that's one that hits pretty close to home in Chiillicothe, Ohio, because we've got an obvious drug problem here. You guys are talking about budgets.
Wrap it up.
I would like to say, I'm told that at one time this city had a 5-man unit dedicated specifically to fighting drugs in Chiillicothe on the police force. Since about January of 2020, as I understand it, that unit has been operating as a 1-man unit, and the guy that does it splits time between City of Chiillicothe and U.S. Marshal Service. That's totally inadequate. That's a true emergency. And that's a really long time for that to be the case. That means we're going on 2 years of not having a narcotics-specific unit policing Chiillicothe, Ohio.
Thank you.
That's a major problem. I think we can all agree that's a real emergency.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you, sir. Do we have anybody else in the audience that would like to speak this evening? Always. Not seeing anybody? Okay. Happy holidays. Okay, then we'll move forward. So from that, we move straight to legislation. We don't, unless anybody has anything else to add concerning those 5 pieces, we'll move to legislation. So whenever you're ready, Ms. Fleckner, we'll start with item number 1.
Third reading of a resolution approving updates to the city's financial policies and procedures.
Roll call on that piece of legislation, please.
Phillips?
Yes.
Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
And that resolution has passed. Moving on to item number 2, please.
Second reading of an ordinance amending sections 111.01, 111.10, 114.01, 116.01, 118.01, and 120.01 of the codified ordinances of the City of Chiillicothe regarding pay provisions for elected officials and declaring an emergency.
And that item will move on to the next meeting. Item number 3, please.
Second reading of an ordinance consenting to the proposal submitted by the Ohio Department of Transportation for the resurfacing project at State Route 772 within the corporation limits of the City of Chiillicothe and declaring an emergency.
And that item will also move on to the next meeting. And item number 4, please.
Second reading of an ordinance appropriating $200,000 for use toward the purchase of a trolley for the Transit Department.
And that item also will move on to the next meeting. Item number 5, please.
First reading of a resolution approving the city's participation in Ohio opioid settlement agreements, including the Janssen opioid settlement with opioid distributor Johnson & Johnson, Janssen Pharmaceuticals, Inc., Ortho McNeil Janssen Pharmaceuticals, Inc., and Janssen Pharmaceutical Incorporated, collectively Janssen, and declaring an emergency.
And that item will move on to the next meeting. Not seeing any other discussion or ask for a emergency, or not emergency, but executive session. Anything emergency going?
Got it on the brain.
We emergency executive. So I will entertain a motion for adjournment by Ms. Nickerson, seconded by Mrs. Lewis. Roll call on that motion, please.
Phillips? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
Merry Christmas, everybody, till we meet again.
No, we'll take